And neutral just means neither pleasant nor unpleasant. So again, as we did the other day, let's use the example of the flowers. When we look at these flowers, they appear to exist independent of us. We have the habit of believing that. We just accept. Yep, those flowers existing there independent of me. And let's say when we experience them, we're having a pleasant feeling. That pleasant feeling, together with the belief that these flowers exist independent of me, will naturally lead me to assume there must be some attractive quality there that's causing my pleasant experience. So we'll see these flowers as inherently attractive or attractive from their own side. But according to this view of emptiness, this is a misconception. Or if I'm seeing these, if I'm having an unpleasant experience when I'm seeing these flowers, together with the belief they exist independent of me, that will naturally lead me to assume there must be some unattractive quality there that's causing my unpleasant experience. We'll see them as inherently unattractive. Or if we're having a neutral experience, we'll see them as inherently neutral. Once we get to step 3, step 4 easily follows. Again, let's say we're having a pleasant experience when we see these flowers. I like pleasant experiences. I want pleasant experiences. Those flowers seem to be causing my pleasant experience. I want those flowers. So that's attachment. Or if I'm having an unpleasant experience, I don't like unpleasant experiences, I don't want unpleasant experiences, those flowers seem to be causing my unpleasant experience, get them out of here, aversion. Or if I'm having a neutral experience, that's simply going to reinforce my mistaken belief that these flowers exist independent of me, which is ignorance. But here in this step, often rather than the word ignorance, we see the word confusion. But confusion here doesn't mean we're confused about these being flowers. We're just confused about how they exist. So the word confusion, it means the same as ignorance. So these are the 3 poisons, the 3 core mental afflictions. All other mental afflictions come out of one of them or a combination of them. They are what's driving our behaviour. And every action we do based on a mental affliction has a result. And the results of our actions are our experiences. And our experiences collectively, the Buddha described them using the word dukkha. So we can see here how we are stuck in samsara due to our mental afflictions and actions, in particular due to our distorted view of reality. So this, of course, is the second noble truth, and this is the first noble truth. And so this describes the process of how we are stuck in samsara due to our mental afflictions and actions, in particular our distorted view of reality. This process of how we are stuck in samsara is also described in this diagram, particularly these 12 links around the outside, which we're going to look at tomorrow evening. So this is actually describing in a little bit more detail how that process works life after life. Whereas this is just explaining the first 2 noble truths. Whereas this really talks about how that whole process works from one life to the next. So that's something we're going to be looking at tomorrow evening. So what we can see here is that if we want to overcome the state of dukkha, if we want to go beyond samsara, we have to go back and eliminate the underlying cause. We have to get rid of this ignorance, this distorted view of reality. And if we can do that, we can eliminate mental afflictions and suffering, and we can achieve the goal of nirvana. So the long-term strategy to transcend, to escape samsara, to achieve nirvana, is the wisdom vipassana practice. In the Theravada tradition, it's said that this fundamental ignorance is simply grasping to self, whereas in the Mahayana, it's said that this fundamental ignorance is grasping to independent me, independent world. So if we can eliminate this fundamental ignorance, we can overcome mental afflictions and suffering and achieve liberation. Any questions about this?
And points 1 and 2, what's the difference between mistaken dualistic appearance and then true ignorance?
Right. Mistaken dualistic appearance is simply how things are appearing to us. They're appearing as if they exist independent of us. This is actively grasping onto that and saying, yes, that's true. That's how they are. So this is merely an appearance, and this is the grasping mind.
Okay. And what about there's karma, which is kai.
It's action, yeah.
It's action, and also you have in the very top you have latencies, stains.
Yeah, that's something. Well, I wanted to add that later. But the brief answer, well, now that you've brought it up, I might as well give the answer now. If things don't really exist independent of us, why do they appear to exist independent of us? What's the reason, if that's not how they exist? And the reason is these latencies. In that every time we are grasping, we're increasing the habit of grasping. So this is like feeding this. But also this grasping mind has another side effect, these what's called latencies of ignorance you see in the diagram. These latencies are like stains in our mind. Those stains cause things to appear in this mistaken way. So if we want to get rid of this mistaken appearance, we have to get rid of those stains. And I think someone brought up the question the other day, what's the difference between nirvana and enlightenment? That's the difference. To achieve nirvana, we need to get rid of this through emptiness practice. Eliminate this. But even someone who's achieved nirvana still has this. So even someone who's achieved nirvana, they look around, things appear to be independent, but they know through their experience of emptiness that's not how they are. So they never buy into the appearances, so they never cause a problem. But they still have these stains in their mind that cause this mistaken appearance. So to go from nirvana to enlightenment, we have to get rid of these subtle stains in our mind. That's the step. So someone who's achieved enlightenment doesn't have this. I mean, what that means for us is like unimaginable, because we've never seen that. We've only ever seen things in this dualistic, they've only appeared to us to exist independent of us. It'd be hard to appreciate what that means. But that's the difference.
That's the barrier to omniscience.
Correct. Yeah, that's right.
If to achieve nirvana, it's only what we need is practice wisdom. What about all the Four Noble Truths that we know about way of life and etc.?
Yeah, when we say only wisdom...
Only, I mean, what about the behavior?
Correct. So remember, wisdom, to practice wisdom, we need concentration. To practice concentration, we need to be ethical. Otherwise, if we're being unethical, it's going to be very difficult to develop single point of concentration. Our mind very agitated. We're going to have a lot of things coming our way, a lot of suffering. It's not going to work. So therefore, ethics is the foundation for concentration, for wisdom. Yeah. Sorry?
It's inside the
In the Eightfold Path. So remember we saw those 8 practices? We can condense those into these 3 areas of ethics, concentration, wisdom. Yeah.
I don't understand what stains of the mind mean. Is that a way of referring to karma? Like
No. Well, big question. But no, that's not karma. These are just concepts that we're using to try to explain certain processes. Like here, this idea of latency or stain is a little bit like, I use the analogy that stain, it's a little bit like, you know, if we wear green sunglasses and we look out on the world, everything appears to be green. So these stains are a little bit like that. That stain is like a filter that means that when we look out on the world through these stains, everything appears to exist independent of us. So it's distorting our perception.
But why does that exist? I mean,
because of ignorance. So ignorance produces these stains or latencies. And then you say, well, when did it all begin?
Are you born?
And then, of course, the answer is it never began. Because then you would have to say something comes from nothing. And everything has a cause. I mean, even in the physical world, everything has a cause. There's not anything in the physical world that comes from nothing. So similarly, Buddhism says in the mental world, everything has a cause. You can't have it coming from nothing. So where did ignorance come from? From seed of ignorance. And where did these stains come from? From ignorance. So it's beginningless. But that doesn't mean we can't get rid of it. But it means there's no first cause.
but if you can have an end, can't you have a beginning?
No. Like,
You're born with it or not?
like, yeah, it's there.
It's there.
I mean, it's like, we can talk, for example, in the physical world, we can talk about the beginning of this universe, but according to classical physics, we can't talk about the beginning of matter and energy, can we? Because that would violate fundamental principles. Conservation of mass energy. You can't create it, you can't destroy it. You can just transform it. So, yes, we can talk about the beginning of this life, but we can't talk about the beginning of mind and of ignorance. Just like we can't say there's a beginning of matter and energy.
But in physics, they're not saying there's an end to it.
No, okay, but that's a little bit different, because here we're not saying there's an end to mind. Just like there's no end to matter and energy, there's no end to mind. But matter and energy you can transform, can't you? Into this universe, into all sorts of different types of energy and mass, no? So similarly, you can't destroy the mind, but you can transform it from ignorance into wisdom, for example. So you can transform, but you can't. So what we can say is that there is an end to ignorance because of wisdom, but it's not an end to the mind. So there's still causality.
What does this say that you've... But the cyclical nature of this is that ignorance leads to the seed of ignorance, which then leads to... Or ignorance leads to stains, which then leads to ignorance. That cycle. And we're talking about getting... And there's no beginning or end to that cycle.
No, there is a bit end to
We're not
this.
talking about the mind.
There's an end to this cycle. Well, if we apply wisdom, that's the antidote. That will eliminate that ignorance. Wisdom is the antidote to ignorance. So if we develop wisdom, we can eliminate that.
The analogy doesn't have to work for this. For me, something that has an end...
Has an end.
That has an end should have a beginning, but that's my own construct. It doesn't matter if it does or doesn't.
Right. But why...
I'm thinking of time as linear, that's why. So
okay.
something that has an end has to have
Right.
some sort of a beginning.
Right.
So if you're saying ignorance leads to stains, etc., but you can end it at some point, then there is anyway, it doesn't matter. So.
Yeah. But again, we're not talking about ending the mind. That we can't do.
No, I'm talking about ending ignorance.
Yeah.
This is,
But ignorance is just a state of mind. And that state can only be there because it was there before. It can't newly arise. But we can terminate it through wisdom. So it's a bit different. I mean, it'd be difficult to have an analogy in the physical world that fits that. I think there wouldn't be an analogy for that, maybe. We'd have to think about it.
What is the seed?
The seed is the habit of ignorance. Habit.
Just a comment about what she was asking. I think the assumption is that wisdom is irreversible, but ignorance is.
The wisdom is irreversible.
Once you reach Buddhahood, you can't go back.
No, it's not about irreversible. It's that once you've eliminated ignorance, it can't come back.
That's right. So if at a certain point there was no ignorance.
Well, that's. I mean, then you'd have to say ignorance comes from nowhere.
So,
yeah.
So the assumption that if it has a cause, it must be beginningless.
Correct. Ignorance. Yeah, that's right. That's the reasoning. Exactly.
So the seed is the habit.
Habit.
And is it also an imprint? It's the same imprint. It's not always.
Yeah, I mean, you can use the idea of imprint. Yeah.
Imprint is not only a habit. It's
well, yeah. I mean, we have to be careful when we use this word imprint, because imprint can mean different things in different contexts. So, yeah. I mean, you can say imprint here if you understand that imprint means habit, but imprint in other areas doesn't mean habit. So, we need to be a little bit careful, because these are just concepts to understand some process. That's all. So we can use the word imprint, but as long as we understand what that means here.
Sankara?
Hmm?
The word Sankara? Sankara, no?
Samskara?
No, samskara. Sankara. The imprint. No?
So if you are enlightened, there is a master who is enlightened. If there is a master who is enlightened, and after 3,000 years, so he has no more these clouds of these stains, yes, in consciousness.
Correct.
And after 20,000 years, he decides to come back to Earth.
Right.
What is with these stains?
Well, he's still enlightened. So remember, this is not samsara. So you can be on this planet and be in samsara, or you can be on this planet and be in nirvana. You can be on this planet and be enlightened. That's a mental state. So he could come back and look like a person to us, but the enlightened state. Yeah.
Can you go back to point number 4?
4.
We said attachment.
Yeah.
It makes me feel good. I want it. Aversion.
Well, no, attachments, because it seems like that's the source of my happiness.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
So I want that.
Yeah.
And then aversion is the exact opposite, which I understand. Confusion.
Is just ignorance. It's another word for ignorance. So if we're having a neutral experience, that's just simply reinforcing our mistaken belief that that exists independent of us. Because if we're seeing it as inherently neutral, we're seeing it as inherently different, existing different from us. So that will just really reinforce our grasping ignorance. So that's what this is, ignorance.
So can you give the same example with the flowers? Just like what would be the type of sentence that I would use if I would have a neutral experience with the flowers?
Yeah, if you're just having a neutral experience, then that neutral experience, you'll think here that there must be some neutral qualities there that's causing that. So we'll see them as inherently neutral, which is another word of saying to see them as inherently existent, as existing independent of me, which is ignorance.
So what is the opposite? Like if I can see the flowers, or maybe a person, for me it's easier. I can see a person that I know that I see him from my view. Okay?
Right.
So I'm asking, what is the wisdom? What is the procedure of the wisdom? Like, I see you, and I know that I see you from my view.
Yes, but are you doing that intellectually or experientially? That's the big question.
I can see that I can see you from my own view. I can see my view on you.
Right, but are you understanding that intellectually?
I don't know.
Or is it just the way you see things?
If I stop and it's the way of, if I don't pay attention, of course I don't see it.
Right. So
If
therefore,
I stop and I can see you this way.
Correct.
That's why I'm attached or not attached.
correct. So as long as it's some intellectual processing to be able to see things in the right way, it's going to be a struggle. Because if you're not attentive, then you're just going to react.
But that's a practice, no?
So therefore, the first stage of improving is exactly this, is in daily life to be attentive, particularly when we're faced with pleasant and unpleasant things, and to investigate and go, well, that person thing really looks very attractive. Is the attractiveness really there? And this will be intellectual.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're mindful, we can do that a bit, and that can help to reduce some attachment. But it's going to be hard work. It's going to be difficult, particularly when something very sudden comes, very strong. We're not going to have time to do that. We're just going to be reacting before we know it. So we want to go further than this. We want to make that experiential. And that's where Vipassana practice comes in. Vipassana practice will help us to, for example, bring the idea that beauty is in the eye of the beholder from an intellectual idea into direct experience. So then we will directly see that the beauty is not there. And then our perception will be completely different. And then you can't have attachment if you're experientially seeing things that the beauty's not there. So that's why, but to get to that point in Vipassana practice, we need Shamatha. Because we can do a lot of Vipassana meditation, but if our mind is not really calm, clear, focused, it's going to be hard in meditation to bring that from intellectual to experiential. Very difficult, because we're distracted. But if we have very good focus and we do Vipassana meditation, that intellectual will start to penetrate. And the more it penetrates, the longer it will stay with us after the meditation. So what you'll notice is when you start to do this Vipassana practice of emptiness and you start to penetrate a bit, you may find for a few moments or a few minutes, a few hours, a few days after, you're still affected by that experience. And during that time, what you're going to notice in daily life is that your mind is going to be more calm than normal. There'll be less mental afflictions. And if a mental affliction arises, it'll be weaker and it'll last much shorter. And you'll find that you'll feel much closer to people. You'll find spontaneously you'll have more love and compassion for more people. But that'll wear off and back to normal. So we need to keep deepening that with Vipassana. But that can only happen if we have more Shamatha. So we need to put those together, Shamatha and Vipassana. Okay. I think we've just about run over time, actually. There were some more things I wanted to cover, but I can cover that tomorrow evening. Is there any last quick question? Otherwise, we'll finish there. Okay, let's finish there. And again, we'll finish with the Shavasana meditation. So again, finding your own space.